Okay, so are we all ready to get started here? Let's see, we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. A few reminders for everybody. Please ensure that you're muted and your video is turned off. It helps us save bandwidth and enhance the performance of Zoom. The meeting is being recorded and a link will be forwarded to everybody in VMS so that those who can't attend can view it. Use the chat box to ask any questions or make any comments unless the presenter gives other direction. And we have 79, 80 participants currently. Go ahead and use view speaker for the best viewing as opposed to gallery. And with that said, I will pass this over to Abby Bullish for her welcome and remarks.
Super, Jessica. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And welcome everyone to the March monthly meeting of the Dallas County Master Gardener Association. This evening, we have an exciting and colorful presentation from Stan Ayton on his 10 top gardens in Texas. We also have a project spotlight on Anne Frank Elementary and an introduction to the plant tag and the home botanist program from Andrew Levy. At this time, I would like to introduce Stan Ayton. Stan started gardening when he purchased his home in 1986. It was an older home with an established garden. He learned to garden by touring public gardens around the state and through gardening programs, many of them presented by the Dallas County Master Gardeners. In 1992, he helped to start the Rainbow Garden Club, North Texas, and ever since has been active in gardening. He is currently president of the Rainbow Garden Club and a member of the Iris Society of Dallas, the Texas Daffodil Society, and treasurer for the Dallas Council of Garden Clubs. Please note there will be more meeting after his presentation. I know it's going to be wonderful, but please stay with us afterwards. Please welcome with me Stan Ayton to our meeting.
Thank you. It's an honor to speak to y'all. As I said, you've presented so many programs to our club. For me, it's an honor to speak to y'all and present a program. It's only fair. So I'm going to share tonight what I call my top 10 favorite public gardens in Texas. And when I talk about public gardens, these are places I've visited. Now, some of them, it may have been a few years ago since I've been there. Many of the photos that I'm sharing tonight are photos I've taken. Now, some of them I couldn't find my photos because it's been so long, so I had to use the internet to get a few photos that I've grabbed and I'm using in this program, just to give you some idea of what we're going to see. So when we're talking public gardens, I'm going to do them in alphabetical order.
Hey, Stan, this is Joellen. Let me just interrupt for a second. Can you hit resume slideshow so we can get a better look?
Okay, resume slideshow. Here we go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, now, okay, so, and feel free to ask questions after each of the gardens. So, the ones we're going to look at tonight, the Chandra Gardens in Weatherford, the Clark Gardens in Mineral Wells, the Dallas Arboretum, the Fort Worth Botanical Garden, the International Water Lily Garden in San Angelo, the Moody Gardens in Galveston, the San Antonio Botanic Gardens, the Texas Discovery Gardens, the Tyler Rose Gardens, and the Zilker Botanic Gardens. Now, many of these gardens started out originally as a private garden, and many of them involved passion. These were passionate gardeners who did these gardens. And our first example is the Chandra Gardens in Weatherford. And this was one of those love stories. Douglas Chandler met Ina Koopman Hill of Weatherford at a dinner party in New York City. It turned into a courtship. They got married and they moved back to Weatherford. And they moved there in 1936. So he had 3.5 acres of barren land to work on. Now, he used picks, shovels, and dynamite. And what he created was an amazing series of garden rooms featuring English and Chinese motifs. Planted over 150 trees, and he had all kinds of plants. I mean, it's just an amazing spot to see, and you wouldn't expect to see it in Weatherford, but yet there it is. Now, it did great while they were alive, but of course, he died in 1953, she died in 1978, and then the property was abandoned for 16 years. Then a couple bought it in 1994, and they tried to restore it, but it's a lot of work. And so eventually they sold it to the city of Weatherford in 2002, and it became a public garden. And the first time I heard about it was I read a story in the Dallas Morning News. I said, well, I've got to go see this place. It just looks so intriguing. And I live in Oak Cliff, and so for me, it was about a 90-minute drive. And it's at the end of a neighborhood street, sort of a cul-de-sac, and you come up to this garden. And for me, the best time to visit would be the spring or the fall, when it's not too hot, because it does get hot in the summertime here. Now, as you'll note, their hours are much shorter on Saturdays, because usually they have a wedding on a Saturday afternoon or early evening. And that's one way for them to make a bit of money. And here's the plaque where the city took it over. And this photo is from May of 2012. I've gone there a couple of times over the years. Now, one thing you'll note with this garden is the water features. And there are water features throughout the gardens. There's wonderful fountains. There's unusual artwork, statuary, and a lot of stonework. So they put a lot of effort into this garden, and you can see they've got tables set up. So they had a wedding, or were planning a wedding, perhaps that afternoon, later that day. The statues, many of them are Chinese, and I don't know how old they are, but they are quite unique. Not something you would find every day in a garden. Here's another one of their water features feeding into a fountain area. They have a lookout point, and it can seat probably 40, 50 people, and you can look out into the neighborhood from this point because it's quite high up on the property. There's a Chinese arch. It's called a moon gate. You'll see these in a lot of Oriental gardens. And it's that element of Chinese architecture within the garden, separating individual rooms. And this is a good place to see the concept of a room garden, individual garden rooms. Now, this water fountain featured 2 dragons spitting out water. Now, luckily, I have a photo of it because they realized that these were very valuable antiques. And so they actually removed these dragons and took them inside the building. So they're no longer visible on this fountain. Now, this was a few years later. We came in the spring. There'd been an ice storm, I think, in February of this year, in 2018. And so the gardens weren't quite at their best, but they did have a lot of daffodils in bloom, and I love daffodils. But even with an ice storm, it was still a lovely garden to visit. It was kind of quiet that day, and so we actually went inside the house, and we got a picture of Ina Koopman Hill. Now, if you look at that slinky dress she's wearing, you could say definitely 1930s. This is something you would expect to see in a Hollywood film of the time. So she was a good-looking woman. He was taken with her, and he came all the way from England and moved to Texas because of her. And then he got a chance, and there's those statues that were once on the water fountain. But I mean, she could have been in a movie, you know, a 1930s movie. And then here's our garden group. We're by one of the waterfalls in the garden, enjoying a spring day. The next garden is in mineral wells, just barely. A lot of times they'll say, well, this is Weatherford, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's in the country. And there's a land bridge, a bridge crossing the road, and that's where you turn to go out into the country to find this garden. And the first time I went with a friend, we nearly got lost because the sign was so small we missed it the first time. And again, this is a love story, a gardening love story. Max and Billy Clark, they built a garden out in the middle of nowhere. It's 143 acres of wild country, and they've transformed it into an incredible garden. And they opened it in 2000. And it's a unique garden. I've never seen any other garden like it. Now here's the happy couple. And they still live on the property. And you can see them some mornings, we were there on a Saturday morning, and they were there pottering around the garden. Now, the hours for this garden, even without COVID, it was different because it wasn't always open. It opened at different times of the year. So it's always one of those places you need to call before you go to make sure it's actually open. Here's a map of the garden. And on the far bottom corner in the left, where it says A, that's the parking lot. And then you walk through the different garden rooms and gardens, past the lakes, the garden railroad to the other end, to the iris garden and the rose garden. So, I mean, it's quite extensive. And it's got a couple of lakes, a number of garden rooms. It's got several different garden railroads running, which I've never, again, that's unusual. You don't see garden railroads usually in a public garden. It's got an azalea glade and a white garden. And it's just a fun place to visit. And again, what's unique about this one, not only is the gardens, but the brick. I've never seen so much brick in my life in a garden. For walkways, arches. I mean, wherever you went, there was brick. You must have gotten a good deal on brick. Here's a picture of the railroad. And it goes in and outside of a controlled building. It'd be great if you've got kids or grandkids who love trains for them to come see this. Or if you've got adults who are into garden railroads, this is the place to visit. And again, the brick, the wisteria as an archway, and then the brick, the long brick walkways, the brick arches. They had a historic tree trail. Here we are. This is, I think, May when we visited. We went on a weekend. We're all dressed for summer. This is one of the lakes. And that building in the back is a deck where you can sit and enjoy the scenery. There's not food service on site except for special occasions. But like if you had a big party there or a wedding or something, they would have places where they could serve food. Well, now we're in Dallas and to the Arboretum. Now, it opened in 1984, and it was two estates, the DeGolliers and the Camps. And they combined it, and it's now 66 acres. It's a very busy place. They had 1 million people in 2018. Now, again, if you've ever visited the Arboretum and you've gone to the DeGollier house, Mrs. DeGollier was a gardener. She loved to garden. She had a passion for it, and she did a great deal with her garden. And it still shows today. There's parts of that garden that are still exist from the time that she planted them back in the 1930s. Now for the Arboretum, there's two big times of the year for them. Dallas Blooms, which is right now. And then they have this big fall pumpkin festival in October and November. And if you're going to visit it, you of course have to plan ahead. I like to go, if I'm going to Dallas Blooms, I like to go the week before it starts, before it gets so crowded, because unfortunately it's gotten so popular, it's like going to a big museum and there's so many people you can't see the pictures. And with Dallas Blooms, it gets so crowded sometimes you can't see the plants for all the people. It can be expensive if you're not a member. Parking is $10 now, but you can get deals, and prices vary depending on season. It's very cheap to go in August because, of course, it's very hot in August. And now here are some photos I've taken over the years of the Arboretum. Now, this was 2020. It was a week before blooms, and the cherry trees were in bloom. Now, I've yet to plant a cherry tree, but every year I say, and I see these trees, I say, I want a cherry tree for my yard. And I've gotten a lot of ideas from the Dallas Arboretum, all kinds of plants that I've said, if it can work here, it can work in my yard. And sometimes it does. They love giant hyacinths because they're very colorful, but unfortunately, giant hyacinths are like big tulips. They're an annual. You cannot get guaranteed reliability as far as them blooming again, looking this way next year. So with bulbs like this, it's an annual. And I have some giant hyacinths and they come back, and if it's a cold winter, they look pretty good. If it's a warm winter, they look terrible. One thing they do that I love about the Dallas Arboretum is the trial gardens. Now, Jimmy Turner started this many years ago, and his goal was to see if he could kill a plant. And if he couldn't kill the plant, then he could recommend it. And they test a lot of plants, not just daffodils and pansies. They test hanging baskets and vegetables. I mean, they do quite a variety of plant tests. And it's an important thing because if they can get it proved that it'll survive in North Texas at the Dallas Arboretum, then they can sell it here and say it was a proven winner in North Texas. A Tasteful Place, now it's been there a couple of years now. What they do is they actually grow things to eat right in front of this building, and then they serve samples of those foods each day. And they have 3 different samples of, could be kale, could be artichokes, any broccoli, anything they have that they're growing, and it's available, they'll do samples of. And they do cooking classes there as well. Water features. Something I've never attempted in my garden yet is to add water features. But when you go to the Arboretum, one of the neat things about this garden is the water. It gives you a sense of peace and quiet, and it adds something to a garden. So it's always something I'm looking for, but I've never yet figured out how to do it in my garden. They've got 2 acres now devoted to Japanese maples. And when they first started it, they brought Japanese maples from as far away as Portland, Oregon. And they had one that was on a truck, and it nearly got lost in an ice storm in West Texas. But it made it to Dallas, and it's part of this large collection of Japanese maples. And these photos, I believe, are December. It would have been a mild winter, and it hadn't gotten cold enough yet for the trees to lose their leaves. So the Japanese maples were gorgeous. And they're a great understory tree. I have lots of them. but I was inspired by the Dallas Arboretum.
Hey, Stan, it's Joelle, and let me interrupt. Somebody wants to know if there are any records of the plant trials.
There should be.
I mean,
You
where
could
would
always call, you could call the Arboretum and ask them. But I mean, they would be the ones that would keep all the records.
and are those plant trials right there visible for anybody, or are they off-site? I missed that if you said it.
They're all throughout the gardens. There's several different locations. There's some close to the frogs where they have the hanging baskets. And then there's other plants that are in beds by there. And then there's some others that are located where the old entrance used to be, the main entrance. There's some more beds as well. So there, as I said, they're scattered throughout the gardens.
Okay.
So we've been to Dallas. Now we've gone to Fort Worth. And Fort Worth is the oldest major botanic garden in Texas, established in 1934. And some of the buildings and infrastructure for the gardens date back to that date. Now, unfortunately, times have gotten expensive, so they've had to start charging to visit this garden as well. It used to be free. It has a lot of gardens, a variety. They have a conservatory for tropical plants, but they've also got a Four Seasons garden. They've got a cactus garden. They've got an iris garden. They used to have roses, but Rose Rosette killed them all off, so they took them all out. They've got a Japanese garden. And they've got perennials. They've got rock springs. They've got a water conservation garden. They've even got a begonia species bank. Now, I don't know if the begonias survived the freeze, but they did have a greenhouse next to the restaurant where they had all these begonias that they were saving, and it was the largest collection in the U.S., but I do not know if they survived the freeze, the Great Freeze of February. One thing you'll notice in the Fort Worth Gardens, of course, is statues. They add something to a garden. And here's a few photos from the Begonia Species Bank. And I'd never realized there were that many varieties of begonias. But that's the thing with gardening, you always learn something new, especially when you go to a public garden. Now here's a view of the former rose gardens, and this was laid out during the WPA period, and that water rail runs all the way down to the end of the garden. It was beautiful with the roses. They even had historic roses in that area, but of course with Rose Rosette, they had to take them out. But it's still a nice place to visit. This is the Rock Spring area. This was an abandoned part of the gardens that they've restored, and they've added in water features and walkways. This is about a year after they had started, so I'm sure it's changed since the last time I was there. The Japanese gardens, of course, are always fun to visit. They have a Japanese festival in the spring and in the fall. And Japanese maples are just a wonderful tree to have as long as they've got shade in the summer. When they do their Japanese festival, they have the bonsai people bring their plants in. They have Japanese drummers. So you get a little bit of Japanese culture twice a year at the gardens. Now we're going to go off to San Angelo. And this is, again, a passion. A man, Ken Landon, working with the city officials in San Angelo, took over an abandoned pond and built it into a lily pond. And these are lilies that he's collected from all over the country and all over the world. And what they did is they had space in this park, and he created a collection of water lilies that are unique. There is no other such collection in the world. It doesn't cost a thing to visit this garden. And it's part of their civic garden, overlooks the Concho River. And there are the ponds for the water lilies. Now, a lot of them are tropical, so they have to put them inside during the winter because it gets very cold in San Angelo in the wintertime and gets cold earlier. I mean, they have freezing temperatures a lot of times in October. But if you go in the summertime, say from about June through October, you can see some amazing flowers. And some of those pads are probably 6 feet across. So you might see something like this. This Nympha Purple Joy, Rita Sage, Murata Bay. So those are just a few of the photos you could see there. There is no place to eat at this park, but there's a restaurant right across the street. And you're only a short distance from downtown. And this park is part of a river park that goes all the way through the city and goes for miles. Sort of like the Riverwalk, except it doesn't have any hotels on it. Moody Gardens. Now, I've been a couple of times. What I did not know is this actually started out as a therapy program and a riding arena. But eventually it got transformed into a massive collection of gardens and pyramids. So now it's got a golf course, hotel, paddle boat, aquarium, tropical rainforest, and IMAX theaters. Of course, with this, the prices vary on age and time and how long you plan to stay. Now, here are the 3 pyramids at the Moody Gardens. One is devoted to the aquarium, one's devoted to the tropical rainforest, and one has the museums and the theaters. Here's your rainforest pyramid. And they've got, of course, parrots. In the aquarium, they've got penguins. They've got sharks. Then they have a Discovery Museum. The problem with visiting a place like this is you really need to plan ahead because they're only open for 6 hours a day from 10 to 4. There are places to eat. There's also IMAX theaters. The rainforest includes an extensive butterfly collection. Now we're going to go from Galveston to San Antonio. San Antonio has an incredible 38 acres of gardens. They're big into research and conservation. They've got environmental stewardship, and it's a wonderful place to visit. They've got longer hours. But of course, with all these gardens, you need to check before you go because of COVID restrictions. Now, just like Dallas has a place where you can eat some of the things that you grow at the gardens, they've got a culinary garden at the San Antonio Botanic Garden. And the Zachary Foundation is part of a big family there in San Antonio. They've got a Japanese garden. The Conservancy Conservatory. This is a 90,000 square foot complex, and it's got tropical plants and rainforests, ferns, desert cacti, and rare orchids, an orangery, and a pond. Now this is an eye view looking at it from above, and it's a series of buildings, and it's just something you wouldn't expect at a public garden. They also have a water saver garden because with San Antonio, they're always on the edge of drought and they're dependent on the aquifers. So they have to be very conscious of what water they use in their gardens. But they show a series of gardens that give you ideas of what you can grow in your garden without using too much water. And so they've got 6 different cottages showing different ways to save water. And there's an image from this water saver garden looking back at the conservatory. And of course, since it's San Antonio, it's much warmer, it's drier, and their plants last longer in the fall. Now they've got a Texas native trail of plants from the hill country, East Texas piney woods, and South Texas. Here's images from the trail. They've got display gardens, they've got formal gardens, just a wide variety of gardening. A scent garden, official monarch way station, anything you could think of to get you outside and with nature. Here's from the display gardens, an image of it. And with this garden, you need to allow several hours because it's quite a distance to cover all you're going to see. You have to remember that it's going to be warmer than it is in Dallas throughout the year. So plan ahead and think about your feet as well as the fact that it's going to be quite warm outside. And there is food on site. Texas Discovery Gardens, which is where the Dallas Council usually meets. These are photos from the last time we visited. We visited in November because we wanted an outdoor meeting location. And it's transformed a lot in the last 20 odd years. It's now very focused on organic gardening and butterflies. It's 7.5 acres. It originally was part of the Civic Garden during the centennial in 1936. They have a lot of programs. They even have an insectarium. Excuse me there. This is a tree that we donated to Texas Discovery Gardens years ago. They had a bit of trouble when they first planted the tree. It didn't get enough water. The second tree got too much water, but the third tree survived. So we always check on it when we visit the gardens. And here's the Grand Alley. Those are, I want to say, Savannah hollies on either side. And this has to be full summer. Of course, with the butterflies, it carries through even to their chairs. Blue Star Memorial. This is something that the Dallas Council raised money for. This is to honor the people who served in World War II, who served at Fair Park. And you'll find these memorials all throughout the country. It actually started back in New Jersey in 1943. Butterfly gardens, you've got to have pictures of butterflies. And they have butterflies inside and outside the garden. And if you've got small kids who like creepy crawly things, they have a nice collection of creepy crawly things and reptiles in their reptile house, which is a fairly recent addition. It's only been there a couple of years. But in the butterfly house, they also have things like the Brugmansia. And it's one of my favorite plants to see inside. But you can grow it actually outside here in North Texas. I know people who have done it. Sculpture in the garden, there's just something about a sculpture that adds something to a garden. This particular piece was donated by Stanley Marcus many years ago. Now, admission here varies by age. There are no food options on site. You should allow about 90 minutes to visit. And again, wear sensible shoes. Your feet will thank you. Tyler has a huge municipal rose garden, 38,000 rose bushes, 600 varieties. And it's a wonderful place to visit. The last time we went to see the rose gardens, just the rose gardens themselves, was back in 2012. And as I recall, it was a very cold day. Now, if you're looking for roses, the best time to go is either May, mid-May, or the middle of October. In the middle of October, they have a rose festival. And they have a rose parade. They have all kinds of activities, a week's worth of activities. But you can also go, normally you can go, end of March would be the time to go see the azaleas, but I heard the azaleas this year had problems with the cold weather and did not do well. So it may not be a good time to visit for azaleas this year. The roses come in many sizes, shapes, and colors. And so I have a few photos of those roses. And some places I was lucky enough to actually get the name tag. But they also have ponds throughout the gardens. And this is something that we saw that I thought was a really cool idea. The master gardeners in Gregg County had put an idea garden next to the rose garden. And so they gave ideas of people of what they could see that would grow well in East Texas. So they had plants that we don't have because our soil isn't the same, but it did give me a few ideas to look at and consider. But again, the idea of partnering with the municipal rose garden made great sense because they get a good bit of traffic. And now we're off to Austin. This is our last garden. This is the Zilker Botanic Garden, and it's located just south of the Colorado River on the south side of town between Interstate 35 and the Mopac. And there's some great places to eat on the way. There's some good barbecue places and other restaurants along the way. But this is a unique, smaller garden. It's about 30 acres. 26. Okay, here we go. And it's set up on a hill, and then it sort of slopes down towards the river. So just remember, when you're walking down that hill, you're going to have to walk back up that hill later. So don't overdo it. But they have a Japanese garden. They've got all kinds of water features, a rose garden. They've got a prehistoric garden. They've got koi ponds and thousands of plants. They've got unique plants. They've got butterflies. And these photos, I believe, were either late October, early November. Now, this is the dinosaur footprint because there were dinosaurs many, many millions of years ago in Austin. It's not the footprint of any state legislator. Interesting water features. You see they use a lot of stone because, of course, there's a lot of stone on a hillside in Austin. Here's Brugmansia outside. Staghorn fern in a tree. And this was outside the office and ticket booth section of the gardens. Waterfalls, because of course it's on a hill and water flows down hills. Asparagus fern in the foreground, and I see other plants as well in the distance. As you can see, they use a lot of stonework. It doesn't cost much to go. I think it was like $4 or $5 to enter. There were no food options on site. You do need to wear sensible shoes and allow about 2 hours because I used to go here and I only went to the top part of the garden. I didn't realize that this garden went further down and there was more to see. So there's always something new to see when you visit the Zilker Gardens. So finally, if you're thinking on planning a trip now that you've gotten your shots and you're ready to go visit a public garden, I would recommend checking out our website, because I have a database of public gardens all around the globe. There was one good thing about COVID. I had time to work on the website. So I have all 500 plus public gardens in England by county. I've got public gardens in Canada by province. I've got public gardens in Singapore. And in just about any country in the world that has a public garden, it's on our website. So that is our program. Questions?
This is Joelle, and I picked up a couple things from the chat room that I wanted to mention.
Sure.
Somebody pointed out that the plant trials, excuse me, I don't have much of a voice, but is online at www.dallasplanttrials.org, no spaces. So that can be found. Somebody else pointed out that the Japanese festival at the Fort Worth Botanical Garden is actually this weekend. So people might want to take note of that. And I wanted to ask, is the Rose Rosette out there in Tyler, do they still have a real good rose garden, or were they hit with it, or are they okay?
I haven't been there in a couple of years, so I'm not sure how their roses are doing.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back. I didn't realize it'd been so many years, because see, we've been going a lot for the Azalea Festival in March, and October gets so busy, it's hard to set aside time just to go to Tyler. Now that I'm retired, I may have time to go see the roses. But as far as I know, they haven't had Rose Rosette in Tyler yet. So we'll have to check it out. But the thing is, with any of these gardens, it's an opportunity to learn. And the thing is, they look different at different times of the year. Even the Dallas Arboretum looks quite different in, say in May or June than it does look in March. And of course, they'll rip out everything that's an annual at the Dallas Arboretum and then completely replant everything. So in the summertime, you've got a completely different set of plants to see. But it's even fun to look, even in December, it's a nice place to visit. So,
one of our members here in the chat also mentioned she was at Chamblee Roses near Tyler last spring, and they don't have Rose Rosette.
yeah, it must be just a Dallas Fort Worth thing.
It could be. It could be.
But anyway, as I said, and these are just some of the big major gardens. There's some new ones I want to check out. I've not been to the East Texas Arboretum yet, or the new one that they're building in Longview. So there's always something new to see. And, you know, I mean, that's the thing. When it comes to gardening, there's always something new to learn. Okay, so.
Well, I'm going to let, if anybody has any other questions.
Okay.
I don't know, Stan, how do you usually take questions on these things?
Well, I don't know. Just go ahead and ask them.
Well, we've got somebody here in the chat who wants to know, can you tell them more about the Rainbow Garden Club?
Well, we've been around since 1992. It's primarily LGBTQ members, but we'll welcome anybody who wants to learn about gardening. We normally, well, this is the first year that we haven't met in people's homes. Normally we meet in people's homes and they show us their gardens, and then we have a speaker. But this past year, we've had to learn to Zoom. But normally from like March through September, December, we meet in someone's homes and they show us their gardens. And about once a year, we'll do a garden makeover with one of our members. They'll have a garden problem. They'll ask us to come in and show them how to rework their garden. But it's educational. That's our primary purpose. And that's why we always use the Dallas Master Gardeners as our speakers, because they're such great speakers and so knowledgeable. But check out our website. We have a lot of information on there about our meetings, about our programs. We even have photos of our gardens. So, of course, I've had so much time to spend because of COVID in my garden this past year. I need to update my photos. But you know, that's the thing, and we get we've got a bunch of talented folks. We even have one guy who's he teaches Ikebana classes, and so in our newsletter he does an Ikebana for every month. So every month we learn a little bit more about Ikebana. So.
Okay, thank you, Stan, very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us tonight. So thank you. And with that note, Jeff Raska will be our next speaker. Jeff, are you there? Jessica, can you help out?
I don't see him here unless I'm missing it.
That's Joelle, and I don't see him either.
Yeah, I don't think he's here.
Okay, all righty. Well, then let's go on ahead. Again, thank you, Stan. That was very informative and we really learned a lot. Let me do the announcements. Rowlett Road will be known as RNB1 going forward, and the new VMS system will identify it as such. Road and Bridge 1 is the name of the county building, but it will be used as an umbrella term to describe everything we are involved in on the property, as in Urban County Farm, the vineyards, the demonstration gardens, and all the other goodies. RNB1 will be having a plant sale the last weekend of April, and details are coming soon. Raincatchers will be having their annual plant sale on Thursday, May 13th. Watch for more details about that coming up. Our marketing manager, Denise Stuber, is refreshing her inventory right now. And soon we will have our new logo, baseball caps and aprons. Also a new selection of sun shirts. Please contact her if there is something special you want to order. Her contact information is on the VMS. Also, Texas Discovery Gardens has announced their April pollinator plant sale, and that will be on April 10th and 11th. You can check their website for details and about how to go about signing up for a spot to come and pick out your prize plants. The shout out tonight goes to Maggie Saucedo and the Salvation Army Garden Group on their award for the grant from Walmart Community Grants. They earned themselves $500. So congratulations to Maggie. So yay, and I understand that you and Roseanne have gotten your heads together and know exactly what you want to plant. So that's wonderful. We're so excited and can't wait to see pictures. So that's the good news. Now for the project spotlight, I would like to introduce Sheila Spotswood, the project coordinator for the Anne Frank Elementary. Sheila was part of the Master Gardener class of 2011, and she became the project leader for Anne Frank Elementary in the spring of 2013. She leads a small team of volunteers in maintaining the garden and working with the teachers and students. Please welcome Sheila Spotswood. Sheila, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? I am here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Sheila. It's good.
Okay.
Doing great.
Okay. Well, I'm Sheila Spotswood, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Anne Frank Elementary School Master Gardener Project. The garden at Anne Frank was started by teachers just after the school opened in 1997. Anne Frank Elementary is Dallas's largest elementary school. It has around 1,100 students from pre-K through 5. And is very diverse with students from all around the world and speaking over 20 languages. Almost all of these students live in apartments with little access to gardens, and they really get excited to come into the garden and see the wildlife and the things growing. We have butterflies and ladybugs and even bunnies. When Anne Frank became a project of the Dallas County Master Gardeners, could you switch slides? Thank you. When it became a project several years ago, it already had good bones. I had a gazebo that could hold a class, a pond with a waterfall, multiple small trees, and planting beds that mostly had evergreen shrubs. The Master Gardeners made many improvements, including rebuilding and adding to the vegetable beds. There's our new, kind of crooked, but our new concrete beds. We started compost bins, filled in the perennial beds with emphasis on native and adapted plants. The Anne Frank garden has a very impressive diversity of garden types in this one pretty small space. The garden includes extensive flowering perennials for pollinators, is a certified monarch way station. It has a desert corner, a wildflower patch, and shade gardens, including many native plants. The pond has a variety of plants and fish, which fascinate even the youngest of the students. Rain barrels and a storage shed were added and were beautifully painted by a student's family member known internationally for her Mexican folk art. Other unique artwork includes a donated wind sculpture and the Pegasus statue you see here flying through the little field of inland sea oats. With this diversity, the garden was selected to be the school on the Dallas County Master Gardener Association tour. The next one is set to be in spring of 2022. The garden is used and loved by the school. Back in pre-pandemic days, classes would come on Tuesdays for 30-minute sessions for a brief lesson with Master Gardeners, followed by some hands-on activities. The lessons related to class topics and could range from plant needs to insects to life cycles. Students could help almost always have something to taste. Master Gardeners volunteer year-round on weekly Tuesdays with or without classes, summer too, and monthly on second Saturdays of the month. The garden has kind of been on hold this year with a few Master Gardeners keeping it maintained for later and with no involvement with the students. Parents and other community members are welcome to help, although currently with COVID restrictions, we haven't had any. Volunteers may help with students, and if you don't want to work with students, you can just do garden maintenance. If you are interested, we are on the volunteer calendar. You can check with me, the project leader, at any time. And before coming, always check with the project leader, like with other projects, to make sure there hasn't been a schedule change. And that's all I have on our project. It's really a nice little garden.
Well, thank you very much, Sheila. I love the pictures and I can't wait for the garden tour. That's going to be so much fun.
It will be.
So thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
At this moment, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is Andrew Levy. Levi. He is the CEO of Plant Tags, and he will be introducing us to Plant Tags and its capabilities, and also our newest Home Botanist program. So Andrew, if you're there, please go ahead and log in, and can't wait to hear what you have to tell us.
Hi, everybody. Let's see if I can get my screen shared. Let's see here. That should do it. So good evening. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about the story I'm about to tell you and the partnership that we're building with your Dallas County Master Gardeners Association. So what we'll do here is forward a slide. So, you know, I don't have to tell anybody on this call that, you know, most folks struggle taking care of plants. I think that's one of the tenets of being Master Gardeners Association, is that you guys are all about educating the world, and particularly our Dallas County here, how to avoid the reality of the right and build something that looks a lot like the vision. So several years ago, I had the opportunity, my background is in software. I had the opportunity to work on a project and got exposed to the horticulture industry, and quickly realized that it's probably the most complicated data science challenge I've ever seen in my life. And, you know, the more I immersed myself in it, and I've watched my wife kill plants for years, and I've done a little gardening of my own, some success, some unsuccessful. I started to formulate a vision for how we could all use data, and we could build a system that could better inform mostly folks that are not as experienced as most of the master gardeners. And again, this dovetails nicely in with your mission. And this diagram here kind of depicts all of the attributes that can contribute to the success and failure of a gardening event. And so, you know, the one foundation that I realized is that the most important thing before any of these variables come into play is one thing, and that's location. So our friend Neil Sperry, who has seen our work here at Plant Tag and is a fan, posted something on Facebook the other day, and I just had to grab it and enhance it and put it out there. Gardening is location-based. And so, you know, if you consider, you know, the differences is from a plant that might be grown in another part of the country, let's just say, you know, I know we like natives here, but there are some folks that buy some non-natives, and they may come from California. They got a plant tag in the dirt that has some care protocol on it, and people follow that even though it's very small and very thin, and they can't figure out why they continue to kill plants. Well, what I learned is the dirty little secret in the space of plant tags is that the tag, more often than not, is engineered for where the plant was grown, not where it's actually going to live forever. And so, you know, you start off on the wrong foot. And so, you know, we set out to solve this problem several years ago and worked diligently building Plant Tag, which is one of the most technically advanced mobile solutions to help gardeners care for all the plants that they own. It's not just about indoor plants. It's not just about trees. You know, our vision is, and we built, is to be able to accommodate the idiosyncrasies of all species, all varieties, heavily location-based. This is all driven by artificial intelligence and some data science. But the other thing that's important to note is when we set out to build this, we knew we had to start with a really credible repository of data. And so we did a licensing deal, the only one that I think has ever been done, with Texas A&M AgriLife, and licensed all of their plant data from, you know, the doctors down in College Station who really got interested in the way that we were approaching this. And then we actually did a licensing deal with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so the foundation of Plant Tag started out with, you know, some data that has been collected and really groomed over many years, and had some smart folks working on it. As I mentioned, the system really leverages artificial intelligence, data science. A very comprehensive library of plants is what we've got today, which we're adding plants and plant data and plant imagery every single day. So this is a passion project that will go on in perpetuity. And what I'll tell you about later on is actually how it makes sense for us to partner and enhance this data together. The other things that we consider, really important to note, is not only do we consider location, but we also the system even has the ability to understand and tailor the plant care that the system will deliver to a gardener based on the microclimates of a yard. You set up a zone, define the sunlight, define the soil type, the pH of the zone. Then you will add plants, and the system behind the scenes is really smart at being able to tell you, how to care for some plants that, are in full sun versus some that are full shade or partial shade. And, it helps people make better decisions about what plants to plant where. One other thing to note about the system, and I'm going to kind of run through some screenshots of it real quick for you. Super easy to use. Our mission was not to build a system that required a lot of training. We wanted it to feel like it was the gardener's experience, meaning that you can personalize every aspect of the system with your own photos. So it actually becomes your own photo library while the system is telling you, actually how to care, sunlight, pruning, fertilizing, freeze protection, and things of that nature. I didn't mention that we're also data partners with NOAA, but this brings up a point when we're talking about seasons and climates that I think you guys will appreciate. When somebody sets up a yard and plant tag, the first thing that we do is we go to NOAA and we pull down 10 years of historical weather data. This is climatic, it's precipitation, it's wind, it's heat, it's freeze, and we put that through an algorithm, and we actually build a climate or a season map based on exactly where the person's yard is. It has to do with average first and average last freeze dates, and then we back that into a beginning of season and an end of season where there's preparation for the in-season period and preparation for winter. And then we also figure out if the person's yard is in an extreme heat zone. And we'll actually create an overlay zone in the middle of the summer for extreme heat areas. And the recommendations for care and tasks will be specific to the climate. So if it is extreme heat, then we're going to suggest that there's more watering and possibly some shade produced, and potted plants maybe get a little bit of shade under a porch if possible. So that's the kind of stuff that the system is smart with to understand. Here's just a few screens. I don't want to talk in detail about all these. What I really would like to see you guys do is go play with it, go try it for yourself, go set your own yard up. But basically real quick, on the left, you've got what it looks like once you've set up your yard, and then you can build a carousel so you can see all of your zones progress over time as plants grow and leaf out and flower out and become mature. You can flip back through time and see how that's progressed. One of the really interesting things that we're going to talk about in detail here real soon is we know that there are systems out there for doing plant ID. You got Picture This, and you've got several others in the market. What they've made kind of their place in the world is in helping people identify a plant. We are a company that helps you care for the plant through, purchase a tree and it could be 50 years, purchase an annual and it, could be a matter of months. But, our system is really about helping you with that long tail of care for every season, all year, for every plant that you've got. And so understanding what you got is a beginning step. And we didn't really like the way that the other ones work. So we actually ended up building our own image recognition system. So when you're adding plants to your yard, and a lot of people have things in the yard if they're just getting started with gardening that they don't know what everything is. It's really important as you're building your zones out and adding your plants that you can ID the right plant and add it to the zone properly. So we have built-in image recognition that's ours. And part of, again, the exciting part where a partnership really rubber meets the road, we're gonna see how this image recognition is going to be used in 4 gardens that we're rolling out here shortly to help people have a better experience understanding the details of all the plants in the gardens, exactly what they are. And they can even add them to their favorites list if there's something that they see in one of the Master Gardeners managed gardens that they really like that they want to go find at a garden center. Next little screen here just kind of shows how we crunch data from NOAA and geography and location and care tips and recurring tasks. And you can even go into the system if you don't like the rhythm that the system defines for recurrence of things like pruning and fertilizing. You can actually go add your own manual tasks to any plant that you want to, and you can set up a schedule and off you go. So very, very robust. We're just in the final stages of rolling out a lightweight landscaping function too. So you can choose a landscaping design style. Then you can define the dimensions of the area that you'd like to landscape. There's a bunch of suggested plants. One of the design styles that we've got in there right now is a pollinator garden, because I'm about to add one next to my beehive. So I'm excited to use the system and add some suggested plants there, but it'll tell you all the quantities that some people struggle computing, like, how many 2 cubic or 3 cubic bags of mulch and soil do you need if the recommended soil depth for your landscaping project is 6 inches. It can tell you in yards. It'll tell you how many average plants you need based on plant spacing. It's not going to allow you to draw anything. It's not going to replace, a landscaping design expert by any stretch, but the lightweight stuff to kind of give you an idea of what this thing looks like dimensionally and what are some possible plants and even some suggestions and some imagery of some other designs that you've seen will be part of the system. So the other thing that's of note is the system has an Ask an Expert feature if you're in a region that there's an expert available. So if there's a gardener that has a problem with a plant, perhaps it's not performing like they like or turning brown, they have the ability to ask an expert. And I think as our partnership progresses, we'll probably involve some of the master gardeners that want to be a part of this as some of the experts to answer some of these questions, because it dovetails nicely into the educating the public. One thing to note, this is not an app that you can go to the App Store and download. This is what's called a web app. It's a responsive web app. It's very lightweight. You can see the instructions at the top, text plants to 46376. It'll take you through a little wizard to set up your yard, and off you go. And then once a month, we send you a text message that says, hey, there's new tasks in the system for all the plants that you own. You might want to go take a look. So it just kind of brings your attention back to Plant Tag to look at what's in store for you for the next couple weeks, which actually is configurable how far you even want to look out. So that's a bit about the core system. What I'm really excited to get into right now is the 2 programs that we're in the process of rolling out in our partnership with the Dallas Master Gardeners. So the first one, like I mentioned, April 15th, we're going to be plant tag enabling rain catchers, RB1, Bathhouse Pollinator Garden, and Lakewood Elementary School. Now, this program, this is kind of the initial rollout, but any of you that are working on other master gardener managed gardens, or really other gardens that people visit, and you think this would be interesting for your project, just let me know, because we'd love to plant tag enable as many gardens as we can. And actually, we supply the signage, so there really is no cost to the master gardeners to plant tag enable, and it's free for the gardeners to use as well, or the garden visitors. So we're going to be putting these signs out here shortly. I don't want to put them out too early because right now it's kind of hard to ID any plants because they're all just starting to leaf out. But I'd say probably in the next week to 2 weeks, we'll at least get the Bathhouse Pollinator Garden sign out. I was down there with Janet yesterday, and it'll be, I think it'll be ready to get the signs up here pretty quick. So you might ask, how does this work? Well, you walk to visitor comes to a garden, they'll see one or several of our signs, super easy to use. Text leaf to 46376, which if you notice, to set up your yard, it's text plants. This is text leaf. Text leaf takes you directly into the search function. What that means is you don't have to build a yard in the system to be able to use plant tag in one of the master gardener managed gardens. It's really just about searching for a plant, looking at more detail about the plant, perhaps adding it to your favorites list, and then going, and continuing a journey in the garden. Activation it's what we call when you text in, super easy to do. Everybody these days knows how to text message. There's no app to download, so it's very lightweight. And when people are in the garden, it's really easy to get it going. Engagement, like I've mentioned, what you can do, understand more about plants, add to favorites list. Follow up, what will happen is the system is pre-programmed that once you leave a garden, 2 hours later, it's just basically going to say, hey, thanks for visiting the rain catcher's garden, hope you saw some great plants. Just to kind of keep the Dallas Master Gardeners and the fact, it kind of sews it all back together, creates a very personal experience, thanking people for the visit and so on. The other thing that as a part of this, as a partner, we've got a partner portal, and credentialed people will be given a login to actually go and see, of all the gardens that are set up, how many people have actually used it in the gardens. And you know, we don't do anything with that information. I mean, it's in the system. You know, we want to know how much it's being used. It helps us understand if there's something that we can do to make it easier to use, or do we not have enough awareness? You know, and you can also understand all the plants that people look at when they're in the garden too. It'll, you know, gives you a little bit of insight as to, you know, what's one or two plants in the garden that people really like, but they really don't know what it is. So, you know, it's interesting data. So good stuff to know. So let me stop and see if there are any questions on program 1 before I get into program 2. And let me see if I can see chat. I might lose control of my presentation. If anybody's got a question, I guess you can just unmute and ask.
Yeah, Andrew, the only question so far has been, you know, what's your revenue stream? It's free for master gardeners, but what about anybody else using it if they set up their own personal garden? Is there a cost?
No, there is zero cost for gardeners, period. So the question is probably, well, you know, how do you guys keep the lights on? We have partnerships with IGCs, like Rubles was our launch partner. And so if you go to Rubles, you'll see our little plant tags, and we actually physically have physical plant tags, but they say, instead of giving you any information about a plant, it says text plants. And so around a Rubles store, if you text plants, then what you're going to see when you set up a yard is you're going to see some Rubles branding in there. Doesn't mean that you can't get away from that, but Rubles then gets some awareness, and there's a link out to their site. And so I mean, it's a lightweight advertising model. So, you know, just so you know. But we have zero plans to beat anybody up with advertisements or do any unwanted outreach. I mean, this is really a platform that we want to help gardeners. And if there's an opportunity to help them, you know, find plants, there's e-commerce in our future at some point, you know, either in conjunction with IGCs or, you know, other providers of live goods. We'd like to have the ability for people in plant tag, if they want to buy a plant and have it delivered to their doorstep, that it could happen. But those are very separate initiatives from plant tag enabling the garden.
Okay, and there's another question. Will there be large signage explaining how to use at the garden, how to use plant tag?
Great question. This is exactly the sign that's going in the gardens. It's about, I don't know, it's about 18 inches by 12 inches. There'll be multiple at key places. Like down at Pollinator Garden at Bathhouse, there's one of the green stakes, and there's a sign that talks about the garden. We're going to go right underneath that in several locations.
Okay, no more questions in the chat room.
Great. Okay, moving on to program 2. So Jeff Rosca has authorized our partnership between the two of us to allow master gardeners to create this program that we've termed the At-Home Botanist. And what it is a couple things. It is an opportunity for the master gardeners to add some of their expertise and experience to the plant tag plant library repository, so that when people go to any of these plant tag enabled gardens, the data is just spot on, and it's rich and it's comprehensive. And so there's an enrichment opportunity for people that want to get involved in this to kind of help us make our data even better. The other part of this too, it's not just, I mean, there's certain things that we want to continue to add to enrich our data. It's things like instructions on planting, instructions on propagation, instructions on fertilizing, kind of more detail, you know, even in, you know, for fertilizing for those plants that fertilizing is recommended, specifically what's the NPK of, you know, of the best fertilizer for this species / variety. You know, that type of really comprehensive depth is going to make plant tag the most robust single source of plant care in the country. You know, we already believe that we've got a, you know, really good head start in the data science that we've added to the system, so much so that we've got patents filed on the way that we do this. But involving smart folks like you all that have got years and years and years of experience, you know, that's what's really, I think, going to round out the depth of the content. So there'll be projects that'll be available. They're short. You know, they should take, you know, perhaps 30, 45 minutes of research, but basically, you know, a plant, you'll go out to the internet, find more information about a certain plant, the plant species, you know, we'll assign the botanical name to you. We'll tell you what we're looking for in the research project. You'll go and do the research, add your own expertise to it, write your content in your own words and send it back to me. The other thing that we're going to be doing is Master Gardeners will be helping to take images of all the plants in all of the gardens that we plant tag enable. And by continuing to harvest the images in the exact garden where people will be using plant tag to get more information, it ensures that our image recognition is absolutely spot on. Many of you that have used some of the image recognition systems that struggle to identify plants, when the reason is they crowdsource all the images of plants and they don't do a very good job of curating, you know, the difference between a rose bush and a hydrangea. You can end up with all kinds of noise and in bad images that are used to train that image recognition system. And once you, what I call poison that recognition model with bad plants, it struggles with all plants. And so that's why we built our own, is that we wanted to control the quality of the image recognition experience, but that's going to take a lot of our own collected images. And so when we go collect images all year long from all these gardens and continue to add those into the exact species and plant tags, it'll be able to nail those plants 100% of the time. 100% is probably unfair, but way better than most plant ID systems do. Down to our ability to even put specific varieties in the system that are unique to the garden or semi-unique to the garden. You know, so it's not just kind of a generic species profile. It can be real specific because we own the data. We can make it as good and make it do anything we want to. You had a question?
Andrew, there is a question. Can you use it with plant tag with the iPad?
Oh yeah, yep. All phones and all iPads. That's a great question. I'm glad somebody asked that. There is no desktop version. This is a mobile only experience because we want people in the garden using the technology, and we want people out exploring the world using plant tag. And eventually we may enable a desktop version as we continue to add more facets to what's possible. But it's mobile and it works great on an iPad. It does. I would say it's probably better on an iPad even than on a phone because there's a lot there. There's a lot there. This little picture that I've got here on the left-hand side of the screen, I had to cut that in half. There's way more stuff in this profile of Scaviola than I could even fit on the screen. So that gives you an idea.
The other question we have is how do master gardeners say they want to get involved in this? What do they have to do? Or should we let Abby speak to that?
Great question. So let me hit 2 more bullets and I think it's going to be what's next. So the hours you devote for working on our stuff gets you hour for hour credit towards your credentials, continuing ed or in garden work. And Jeff has already approved this. So, there's big incentive for those of you folks that have time, that want to accumulate more hours, that are really interested in changing the world through plant tag. I mean, that's really the mission that we're set out on. And so there's lots of opportunity for getting involved. The other thing beyond just the credits that I'm going to put out there is plant tag has agreed to donate $10 for each completed project, successfully completed project, to the Dallas County Master Gardeners Association. So we'll collect up, all the projects that have been done every month, and we'll send you guys a check. So I know that'll help out to replace some damaged plants. And nonprofits are always needing to fundraise, so I'm helping a fundraise.
There's also a question about what your privacy policy is for home gardens. Maybe you know where that's coming from.
Well, we don't publish the gardens. I mean, that's yours. The garden is yours. It's not like we broadcast your garden to the world. Now, Eventually, there's going to be an opportunity, if you wanted to let other people see all the plants that you had in your yard, that you'll be able to make it public. But by default, it's all private. We have our privacy policy. You guys can go read it. We don't sell our data. Hopefully that answered the question. So question is, how do you get involved? Any of you that are interested, I think that, so let me see. I think
Andrew, while you're looking there, there was a follow-up question on that. It's like, are you going to share our information at all?
No,
Okay.
no, we don't share your information. We don't sell it, we don't share it. Yep, don't sell it, don't share it. No.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and also, Andrew, this is Abby Bolish. I believe our education coordinator, Cindy Large, will be coordinating and helping people to figure out how to go about filling out the template that you will be providing. And therefore, you'll have very succinct information on each of the plants, and you'll have bullet points as to this is what we want here, 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 and here. So it's going to be kind of like a plug and play for each of the plants that you want profiled. Is that correct?
That is correct. And so Cindy's point, and if, you know, those of you guys, and there'll be an email, I think, that'll go out that'll kind of that'll detail what, you know, what do you need to do next. But if you're interested, you know, we're only taking 12 people to start with. So I probably should have put a little bit more of that in here, and I missed that. We're only taking 12 people to start with, and we want to work the kind of the kinks out, and, you know, how do you get the right people that have got the right expertise, that, you know, do a nice job with writing and really enjoy research and really want to be involved. So there is a form for those of you that say you're interested. We'll send you a link, an email link to a form. It's basically a project, and so it's kind of a test. Everybody will do the same species of plant. We'll pick that, and everybody will do the same. And we'll then kind of look at the work and pick the, you know, the top 12 people that seem to be a good fit. And, you know, we'll work through the, you know, the mechanics of how do we make this smooth? How do we do, you know, the right job of making it easy for you? Are there other tools that we can give you? And then we'll open it up broader after that.
And another question, is this child friendly?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, as long as you don't mind your children reading about fertilizer and
giving them your phone.
Yeah, and giving them your phone. I mean, it's, you know, it's you can see what's on the screen right there. That's a, you know, that's a great example. You know, it probably, the way that we describe the plant probably is not written for children exactly. There might be some big words in there that but I mean, kids today are smart. So, you know, I would, there's not anything that's going to offend anybody, if that's the question.
And the question was specific to our school gardens, but I guess not every kid's going to have their smartphone with them during school. So
no, and in working with Cynthia and Mark, there's some thoughts of using plant tag as some of the teachers go out in the garden and take the kids around. They use plant tag to actually better describe every one of the plants, and the educators have iPads. So, you know, there's a way that not everybody has to have their own in the schools. And if there's tours, same thing can happen. Any more questions? So I think in closing, I would say go play with the system. It's if you text plants to 46376, you can go set your own yard up. And I am always looking for thoughts, ideas, suggestions. You know, I think our content is good, but there's no such thing as the perfect content when it comes to plants, because 10 different people are going to have 10 different opinions, and there's facts, and then there's the gray area. So, You know, I'll take feedback on anything that you guys will provide. We'll make this better together. One thing I want to note is I live at White Rock Lake. So this whole initiative to change the world through plant tag is being born in your backyards. And you're the first gardens that were garden enabling. So cool stuff. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you, Andrew, very much for spending some time in describing what this exciting program is going to do for us. It's going to be a lot of fun.
You bet.
I'm hoping for a very good team building situation. So thank you very much.
Yep. If you guys have any follow-on questions, my email is real easy. It's andrew@planttag.com.
Got it. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the closing remarks. First off, everyone. There we go.
Thanks, Abby.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Our next Dallas County Master Gardener Association monthly meeting is going to be live on Zoom on Thursday, April 22nd at 7 o'clock. Our guest speaker is going to be Carol Rowley from the Denton County Master Gardener Speakers Bureau. And her topic is going to be pleasures and pitfalls of perennials. You can earn 1 CEU by attending. And please let us know if you hear about a presenter we may want at one of our future meetings. So thank you all for your attendance this evening, and I hope you enjoyed the meeting, and we'll see you next month. So thank you very much.